You are tuning in to another great episode of the 1946 Culture Shift Tour. This is season 2, and I am your host, Sharon Rocky Roggio. Today we meet Dr. Bobbie Glass, a fearless trans advocate and educator fighting Christian nationalism in a deep red state. From banning conversion therapy to building global solidarity, she's making good trouble and shifting culture 1 mile at a time. So, Bobbie, thank you so much for being a part of season 2. It's so wonderful to see you again. How are you doing?
I'm doing fabulously. Am, I'm living my best life actually, so that's about as good as you could do.
It's really good to hear because I know there's a lot of things going on, especially in America, and especially with a lot of the work that you do. And I know a
Mhm.
lot about the work that you do, but can you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what kind of activism that you do? First of all, who you are and just
Yeah.
what makes you cool, but then also what you're doing in the world to shift our
Oh,
culture.
well, I'm a lifelong educator. I'm just starting my 49th year as an educator. So that means I'm kind of old. So I was born in 1950. So to save you the trouble of doing the math, that means this year I'm going to turn 75. Life has been really, really good to me. I'm openly transgender, and that's just something that I've lived with from my earliest memories. I have no memory in my life where I didn't think I was female. And being born in 1950, that created a lot of issues. And especially since my family lived in a little coal mining town in the Appalachian Mountains of Virginia. So it was a great place to grow up. It's a whole lot like Mayberry and the Andy Griffith Show. It was a whole lot like that. And that's where I grew up, but it was very isolated. And as I got older, probably reaching kindergarten age or something like that, I I just realized there is something significant going on with me, and anytime I try to talk about it with my family, I get ridiculed, put down, redirected, all of this kind of stuff, and it became obvious to me very quickly that I can't talk about what's going on inside of me, and I adored my father. I just adored my father. He was a pharmacist, and my mom and dad owned their own little drugstore in this town, and it was just a fabulous place to grow up because everybody walks through the front door of our drugstore sooner or later, and I get to know them all and develop relationships. So it's a huge part of who I am and how I interact with people is just that whole experience. But my dad tried to teach me how to play baseball and football, and I was not any good at any of that stuff. But somewhere around the first grade, I realized that I could compete in academics. I could really excel at that. And so from first grade forward, I was going to be a straight A student. And that would be the way I could do that competitive kind of stuff, but I didn't have to play sports. And so fast forward, just fell in love with special education and working with people that have disabilities. And so I've got 3 master's degrees and my doctorate in that. And I began my first 12 years of my career doing research and development at the American Printing House for the Blind. And they make all the educational materials for all the blind kids in the country and adults too. And I was responsible for developing the science, math, and social studies materials, and just a fabulous gig because I got to work with kids all over the country. And that was also the time, this was going to be like mid 70s, approaching early 90s, and the technology stuff was just starting to show up on the field. And somebody had figured out how to get an old Apple IIe computer to do speech output. And that was just the most fabulous thing that blind kids had ever seen. And I just really got obsessed with the technology too. And after 12 years in doing that and developing technologies and things like that for kids that were blind, there was a group from Apple that came to Louisville and said, we got to see what's going on here because nobody calls our programmers more often with better questions than you all do. And so we just had to come. And the next thing I know, I was going to work for Apple. And that's where I wrote my dissertation. And they were real big into getting into public schools and their technology there. They couldn't compete with IBM had the world of work. And so it's going to be real important for all of their technology to be accessible to anybody with disabilities, whether they were blind or deaf or quadriplegic. And oh my gosh, what a fabulous gig. And I got to work with so many great people. But this is also occurring at the same time as the disability rights movement was starting to grow across the country. And so the movers and the shakers of that period, the 70s and 80s, were mostly in Berkeley. Judy Heumann and Ed Roberts and all those people at the Center for Independent Living. And I was just really enmeshed with all of those crazy warriors who were demanding civil rights for people with disabilities. Plus, here I was at Apple developing the tools that helped them. It was redefining human potential. And so it was a great, wonderful time. And I just mentioned that because I have worked with marginalized people pretty much my whole life. And I learned so much about um, the disability movement. And so I'm really kind of entrenched in that background. By the late 90s and everything, I I was working for governments and things like that. My whole life had just become fundraising and politics. And that's not what I signed up for. And so it was like, oh, why don't you go back to teaching? And so, yes, I did. And so into the 90s, I'm back working in public schools. And because I had a doctorate and worked in public schools, I was kind of really a good catch for the universities around here. And so I started teaching graduate school too, right there at from 1999, 2000 in that period. And so that's what I have been doing forever. It seems like just working with children and adults during the day. And in the evenings, I was teaching teachers who needed to get licensed in special education. And so I have been doing that for over 20 years, and I have trained like 8,200 teachers, principals, counselors.
Wow.
Had to spend 8 weeks with me on their way to get licenses. And so I've really had a fabulous life. But somewhere along that line, in the midpoint of it, I was starting to get burned out because I've just, here I've been doing this 30 years or so. And, and I didn't know what to do about it. And I thought, I want the toughest kids there are. I want the kids that are going to challenge everything, my training and experience and I want the kids that'll do that. And I knew where to find them. In Louisville, we have 13 psychiatric residential treatment facilities. They're hospitals. And the children that are admitted there and hospitalized have been legally deemed unfit to attend a public school. And there's all kinds of conditions that make someone unfit to attend a public school. Things you might expect, like they're children, but they're already convicted felons. They've committed murder, armed robbery, arson, rape, drug dealing in massive quantities. And so there's a whole lot of people that come there through the juvenile justice system. And then you might expect there's a whole lot of kids that were raised in really toxic environments and have all kinds of problems acting out sexually. And you just can't have them in a public school. They're so aggressive with their sexual acting out. And so there's just dozens and dozens of conditions that cause children to go into facilities like that. And I wanted to be their teacher. And that was the best decision I ever made because I clicked with them. But one of the things that makes children unfit to attend a public school is that they have attempted suicide or they're persistent self-harmers. They're cutting themselves every chance they can get. And a public school just isn't set up to deal with stuff like that because you have to have at least the eyeballs of two adults, staff on them all the time recording what's going on in every 15-minute blocks and all this stuff. And it's very intensive. And so my school, and actually most people would not believe this, but the largest children's psychiatric facility in the whole country is what was called Our Lady of Peace when I first started. Peace Academy now, 260 kids between the kindergarten and the 12th grade that are hospitalized. Anyhow, it's incomprehensible, the things that happen to children and what gets them in these kind of facilities. So the number of kids coming in for attempted suicide that were queer had just been growing and growing over the past 7 or 8 years. It was like every month, more and more kids are being hospitalized for attempted suicide and the persistent self-harm because they are just being relentlessly bullied. And this is also about the same time I met you. Oh my gosh, when I heard what you were working on, it's like, oh, thank you, God. We have needed a tool like that for so long. And I jumped on your bandwagon right away because the importance of that was just overwhelming to me because I live on the buckle of the Bible Belt. And so you've got all of these kids that are being relentlessly bullied. Their parents aren't supporting them. They're sending them to conversion therapy. And it's just really getting out of hand. I know I'm talking too much.
No, not at all.
But
This is honestly, your past is
at one point, this would have been about 3 summers ago, one of our state senators, and she won't mind me giving her name because she and her family have been the subject of New York Times articles and everything else, Senator Karen Burke. And so I just bumped into her one summer and she says, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe it. All of this hateful anti-transgender stuff that has been filed in Florida, passed in Florida and Texas, they have cloned that and they have pre-filed all those bills in Frankfurt, in our state capital. And we have a GOP supermajority. It's unbelievable. There's 140 seats in our legislature, and 117 of them are held by Republicans, Christian nationalists. And it's a blowout thing. Whenever you head into a hearing and things like that, you pretty much know there's no chance that you're going to persuade enough people to beat that 117 to 23. It's just, those are terrible odds. But anyhow, she says, can you help me? And I looked into early retirement and I could. Um, and I was in better shape than I thought. And so it's okay. I'm gonna do this. It's like I want to give you my full attention. So this is in the summer, and then we're headed into the fall. She had a transgender son, Henry. Henry came into one of our facilities at age 14 for its attempted suicide. And this is how I get to know the family. And boy, he became kind of like our poster child for good mental health because everything about his life turned around. And he came out, completed high school, and got accepted at Georgetown University and went to college and did great. He was such a good advocate and visible person. He gets out of Georgetown, and he had gotten a job with the Human Rights Campaign in Washington as a deputy communications director. And so it was like, oh gosh, Henry's one of our big success stories. Here's a kid who tried to kill himself at 14. And look at him now. Sorry.
no, you're fine.
All of this anti-trans stuff that's popping up in every state all over the country comes to the Human Rights Campaign and they want a response and they put it on Henry's desk. This sounds like something Henry ought to deal with. And so that became Henry's job, is developing the position statements and responses to all of this anti-trans stuff that's popping up all over the country. And then in December 2022, just got to be too much and he killed himself right around Christmas. And so the whole family is devastated. And Senator Berg, and it's like we were going to go to Frankfurt and we were going to hard charge this person, and her son killed himself 2 weeks before the legislative session started. So we're still trying to go to these hearings and try to persuade people. And the Christian nationalists in these committees were so belligerent, and she would be testifying and we would have like a 3-minute opportunity. And as soon as she went over 3 minutes, says, your time's up. Cut off her mic. It's, wait a minute, I'm one of you. I'm a state senator. And we don't care. Your time's up. And they just treated her horribly. And And that was a session where they passed the most restrictive anti-trans bill in the country at that time. It was everything from Florida's Don't Say Gay to eliminating all the gender-affirming care for kids 18 and under. It gave teachers, school people, the right to misgender children in the classroom and to speak to them about how they think they're mentally ill and all of this stuff. And that law not only allowed them to misgender and to traumatize these kids even further, it gave them protection. It was like the school systems could not do any kind of corrective action or disciplinary stuff. They had to just let it slide. And so when you get teachers that can intentionally misgender kids in front of a whole classroom, it's like, what do you think is going to happen to the bullying? And I can't say anything about being gay or anything like that, that it's just another part of the human condition. And it's really becoming so difficult for teachers to have any integrity anymore. Because I'll give you an example. In middle school, high school, you're in your classroom and some bully across points to the kid and says, "You're a fag." Now, what am I supposed to do as a teacher when that happens in my classroom? Really, what am I supposed to do? And it's like I don't tolerate people making fun of kids that don't smell good, who take food home on the weekends because they don't have any food at home. They're queer and everybody hates them. And all this stuff just got to be really personal with me because I know their names and I know their faces and I've been to their funerals. And I couldn't help but become an activist. So that's kind of the long answer to what happened. And it was like, if I don't go, if I don't go to Frankfurt and if I don't get in these hearings and if I don't speak truth to power, who's going to do it? And it was no decision really. It's like, there's nobody that can do that better than me.
That's
And
quite a
so I had to
backstory.
go. And so that's kind of what started it all. And it's because I understand what all of these hateful laws are doing to kids and families. And oh my gosh, we had families that became political refugees, actually. They had moved from Florida to Kentucky thinking they'll be able to get gender affirming care for their kids. And they were right, we could until 2023 and this bill is passed, and that's just happening all over the country, that this Christian nationalism in our state legislatures, and now it's over half of the states, 26 of them, that have put bans on gender affirming care and things like that. And they are creating whole families of political refugees that are having to flee to the blue states to just get the stuff that's going to keep their kids alive and happy. And so, yes, I'm very passionate about all of this. And I've got dead students, you know, and Henry's not the only one.
That's a
And
lot to
so
deal
it's all
with.
very, very personal to me.
It sounds like it. So it sounds
And
like
I don't mean to end on that happy. I mean, I know that's really a sad, tragic note, but it's like ha being an activist came and got me. I didn't really decide to be one. It was like it came for me, and that's how it came for me. And it's really been a life-changing thing for me because now I'm just speaking all over the place and advocating, and I've become a pretty big political figure in my state right now.
this is honestly like your backstory to how you got here makes so much sense as far as I can't imagine the things you would see on a day-to-day basis in those schools. You mentioned something about conversion therapy and some of the things that the kids go through. Was there actual conversion therapy going on within those schools that you were a part of?
Well, that's a great question. I'm a conversion therapy survivor myself. Back in the 70s, when I met the woman that would become my wife, I was not about to enter marriage and keep this stuff about myself secret. And it's like, oh, you got to know this about me if we're going to talk about marriage. We made the same mistake that a whole lot of gay men made at the same period. Is marriage is going to cure me. Get married. That's going to cure all of your sexual, stuff. And it didn't. And she was a member of a whole family, generational members of the Church of Christ, which is like one of the most in Nashville, Louisville, this part of the world, it's like, oh man, that's a hotbed of the Church of Christ. And, she was going to divorce me after we started having children if I didn't start getting into conversion therapy and all the church. And that's another thing I need to remind people about. Being born in 1950, it was called cross-dressing, and you could be arrested for cross-dressing in public. You could be institutionalized if you persisted in that. And as a child, that terrified me. It was my senior year in high school, 1969, is when Stonewall happened. So I'm already passed through adolescence and everything else, and that was the beginning of the gay rights movement, And so I was just finishing high school and getting ready to start college at that point. Now, the American Psychological Association and the AMA had pathologized being gay forever. But in 1973, they decided to quit doing that about homosexuality. And they go, oops, actually, we weren't right about that. It's just it's a regular part of the human condition, and we're not going to pathologize that anymore. So they did that in 1973. They didn't extend the same courtesy to trans people until 2012. So I'm 62 years old in 2012. For that part of my life, the mental health and the medical community have called me a sexual deviant, perversion, abnormal psychology. Whenever I tried to do any research on why me? Why do I have to live with this? All I had to read in library books was about sexual deviancy and all of that stuff. So when you think about 2012 was not that long ago. This is like 13 years since we haven't been. And then, in 2012, being trans and non-binary, that's just another part of the human condition. Whoops, we didn't mean to destroy so many lives and create this culture. So there's all of that going on too, And so I'm in conversion therapy for a long time, almost 20 years with this church and everything. And it nearly killed me. I'm surprised I'm still alive because I attempted to do myself in more times than I can count, really. It was awful. It was dreadful. I finally, when all kids were grown and out of the nest and empty nest years and everything, it's like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I am going to medically transition. And my spouse at the time was at the divorce lawyer the very next day. And, you know, I can't be a lesbian, so we're over. And that kind of happened there. But the conversion therapy part was that was very popular. And people like me there was not the expertise in this part of the world to really deal well with gender dysphoria and things like that. Most people were into the conversion therapy approach and try to get you to stop it. Can't turn it off, and you just can't. So I met up with some people who are trying to get conversion therapy banned in the state, and yes, and I'm working with them, and we were actually able to get it banned in the three largest urban areas: Louisville, Lexington, and the northern Kentucky, Covington, Cincinnati, that area, and we got it banned there, and it was pretty good. We went through the state licensing board and worked that route where if a licensed therapist is practicing conversion therapy, they can lose their license in our three biggest urban areas. But we didn't have any luck getting that through the General Assembly to make it statewide. So anyhow, last summer, Governor Andy Beshear did an executive order to ban it statewide and went through the licensing route too. And that infuriated our General Assembly. So this session that began in January, they were determined to put the governor in his place because, they're this Christian Nationalist GOP supermajority, and how dare the governor do something like that? So they introduced a bill to legalize it and to also remove any kind of repercussions for people that practice conversion therapy. They're not going to lose their license. They're not going to get penalized. They're not going to be sent to some kind of diversion program or anything like that. And so now they've opened it up again. And so it's legal now in our state, and it's been that way. And I'm still on the warpath against it because it's horrible. It's horrible mental health. not the least bit Christian in any way. Something like 1946, actually, I've got to insert that. That was so powerful because I had the tools and the language and now the knowledge about what the Bible had done to the whole world, really. And that totally changed the direction. And so, I have a tool now to reason with religious people about why conversion therapy is wrong and harmful and what you're doing. And, the movie is just fabulous. And
Thank you.
I've tried to support you every way I can as a teacher.
No, thank you.
Anyhow, there's a whole lot of stuff like that that's going on, but you really also set me on a path to help me study and learn more about how we got the Bible. Boy, is that a can of worms, and how it has been adjusted over the centuries to make it say things that were not there in the beginning. So now that's a really huge part of what I do. In my state, I am not going to be able to flip our General Assembly to purple. I'm just happy if we can get it to purple. I can't do it without being able to reason with religious people who believe that hating the LGBTQ population is earning them brownie points with God, and so I do a whole lot of speaking to religious people, trying to get them to see that, no, you're not doing God any favors by hating your neighbor like this. And I'm talking too much. I'm
No,
sorry.
actually, I want to ask a question because you mentioned, traveling thousands of miles just even within your own state. You're in a red state dominated by Christian nationalism, navigating the past that we just heard about, your conversion therapy experience, winning that battle, losing that battle. What keeps you motivated to keep doing this? But then also, I kind of want to know what's going on in these courtrooms. I want to know what's going on in these town hall meetings that
Yeah,
I'm not a part of, and I see you doing the work. Can you tell us
yeah.
about it?
Well, that's very interesting because in that process of being in hearings in our state capitol and showing up to speak truth to power, I met a lot of people that are like-minded from around the state. And one of them was the Fairness Campaign here in the state, which is the largest human rights PAC in our state. They're very well endowed, very, very expert at working our legislators in the General Assembly and tracking. There's quite a science to it, like who's introducing a bill, to what committee is it going, who do we know in those committees, and how can we, slow it down so that maybe it doesn't even get considered this session, or who's trying to fast track this stuff, and the intel that goes on inside of all of this, like where is anything and point what point is anything in the process? And it's like, oh, I want to go to work for those people. And so I did. I found Chris Hartman. I want to be on your board of directors. I need to be working with a team like that. And next thing, I'm on the board of directors. and since then, I'm now on the executive committee and a chair of a multi-million-dollar fund devoted to systems change. And so that's pretty inspiring right now. And I've also been able to meet a whole lot of people, starting with Senator Karen Berg with the state Democratic Party. And oh my God, do we have some fabulous warriors. Pamela Stevenson is a retired Air Force colonel, a JAG officer. She's an attorney. Mitch McConnell is retiring from the Senate, and she wants to run as the Democrat to replace him. And so it's like, oh my gosh, I've been working with these people now for years and we're friends and I've got their phone numbers. It's just really been great. And so the ACLU is also a huge part of the Fairness Campaign. And so I'm working with them on the litigation to, like what they're doing in the public schools. There's two fronts trying to reverse the stuff they've done in the public schools, which is impeding the education promises that we gave as a state to all the students in the state. And then there's another front with the ACLU where they're going after the ban on gender affirming care and trying to do that. And so the next thing I know, it's like I'm really connected with the movers and shakers, but I've been living my whole life in Louisville, Jefferson County, And in the process of going to the state capitol over and over and over, I'm meeting people all over the state. And it's like, oh my gosh, I got to get out of this town and start meeting all of these great people in every little nook and cranny. And it's kind of like I'm armed and dangerous now because I've got this huge budget of money that I can work with to create systems change. I'm in the LGBTQ caucus of our state Democratic Party, who has all the blueprints for how do you go into an area and start the process of flipping a House seat or a Senate seat. How do you run for school board? How do you run for your council? What are the steps, in establishing a greater presence of Democrats in our state capitol and our city councils on our school boards? And so that's what I'm doing right now. It's like I've I've got the people in the state Democratic Party with the blueprints on how to make it happen that can help me with the community organizing and the education aspect. Like, well, where do we start? What do we do next? How do you become a precinct captain? How do you find out who the registered Democrats are and how do you find out all this stuff? And so they take care of that. The fairness campaign is just tickled to death that I want to go into all of these nooks and crannies in the state. And Kentucky is really kind of a bigger state than most people realize. On the far western end, the Ohio River runs into the Mississippi. And so there's all kinds of stuff around that part of the river transportation world over there. And then in the Appalachian section on the eastern side of the state is coal mining country. And oh my gosh, are they furious with what Democrats have done to the coal mining industry? And and that's a hard audience. I'm not going to lie. That is a tough audience because it's 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 always been a poverty-stricken area. And I don't mean this in a demeaning way, but they're just generations and generations of families that produce tobacco and coal. And that's their livelihood. And starting with Bill Clinton, it's like all of that stuff vanished with them. And so that's a really tough audience, in terms of taking tobacco away and taking coal away. Their churches and their religion are magnifying all of that resentment and everything else. I'm used to playing to tough audiences. I tell you, you can't be a transgender school teacher in a middle school or a high school or a college campus for that matter. I am as out as you can be. And I am not scared of tough audiences. I really appreciate that because most people don't know a transgender person. And that was another thing I had to admit. It's like, well, if you don't know a transgender person, I'm a really, really good one for you to know. I mean, I have a big family. I've got 4 grown children. They're all straight. They're all married. And I've got 10 grandchildren. I have my own home, cars, pensions and a perfect credit score. And, it's like when it comes to, reputation and accomplishments and things like that, I just happen to have it here. Back in my Apple days, my team and I after my dissertation, we did this book, Computer Resources for People with Disabilities. It was really great. And I wrote a good bit of it and I was the editor. As we were coming through with the first part of it, it's like, how can we really make this thing hot and sell? And I thought, I wonder if we could get Stephen Hawking to write the foreword for it. And so I went to the library and I found a fax number for him and we wrote a letter and sent a
Amazing.
table of contents and a couple of chapters. And so here we got the foreword by Stephen Hawking. And
Amazing.
and it was like, nobody's ever asked me to talk about the importance of my technology. I would love to do that. And so when I'm talking about accomplishments and things like that, it's like, yeah, I'm a very accomplished person. And I just had that because it's like, oh, yeah, Stephen Hawking did a favor for me once. And, you know, they're just, great things like that have just happened to me my whole life. And so that's why I say, well, I'm a really good transgender person for people to meet. And I don't mean that in an arrogant way. I really don't. It just dawned on me one day. Most people don't know a trans person. I'm a really good one for them to get to know. And so and I guess that's part of growing up in a drugstore. I just want to get to know everybody. I want everybody to meet me and get to know me and build friendships and stuff like that. So I'm really having a good time because I don't hate the people that are voting for Trump. I hate the ignorance. And I'm an educator, and I'm stupid enough to believe I can educate my way out of this mess. And so that's what I'm doing. And so I'm not scared to go into these coal mining towns. I've got people aren't familiar with our geography, but I've got 8 presentations to give in rallies and things this month over in the coal mining part of the state, which is as red as it can be. And I am looking forward to it because I know I'm going to change a few hearts. And
It
I'm going to
sounds
talk
like,
somebody into running for the General Assembly. And
yeah,
I'm going to be able to give them the support they need to make a run for it. Because that's a really hard job. It's really hard to beat an incumbent your first time at bat. And so it's a labor intensive job, but I don't have
it
anything
sounds
else
like
to
you're the
do.
perfect person to go around to these places and meet the community. And I'm so excited to hear that you're having fun in it. And,
Yeah.
I know that the numbers, the odds you gave us are daunting at times, but your positivity and your encouragement to keep going, it really does only take one story, meeting one trans person, hearing something that gives that ripple effect of the change, which is kind of what we're talking about in this whole series here. What are these ripple effects that we are doing that really are making and changing our culture? To that end, I know that you just launched a podcast called Trans Gurus, I see,
Yeah.
and you hit over 50,000 subscribers, or maybe that
Well,
number is bigger than that. Can you
this week
tell
we're
us
up
all
to
about your podcast? What's going
we're
on
up to
there?
63,000 today.
Wow, that's
And
amazing.
it really is. It really is. Well, there's 4 of us, and 3 of the women are in South Florida. And how they found me and talked me into being a part of it, I don't know. I try to how did I ever get involved with them? I'm just really glad I did. The 4 of us. Jimmy is a Marine veteran, a longtime Marine, Black Hawk helicopter pilot, still flies helicopters. And so and a bodybuilder, just like a top tier bodybuilder. And so Jimmy brings that kind of mentality. But I don't know anybody that knows more about quantum physics and the power of energy and parallel universes and how to move from one level, how to vibrate more highly to get to other. So Jimmy's fantastic. A reality TV star. She's really a humanitarian and has spent like over 10 years high up in the Red Cross and things like that. But in her youth, again, because we didn't have any medical care in the 70s and it just, it was all back alley, black market kind of stuff. And she was like a showgirl type too. And would go to these pumping parties where they actually injected you with silicone from the hardware store. You would not believe all the, especially showgirl types in the trans community that, work in the gay bars and stuff that went to those pumping parties. And they were great for the first few months, but then that stuff begins to deteriorate and decompose and start poisoning your arteries and everything else. And so she had a massive amount of stuff done and was selected to be on that show Botched about plastic surgery gone bad. And it was like there was nobody that had really been more botched than Raji. And so she comes from that background. God, does she have a tremendous personality and attitude about what she's been through. Ella is a world global traveler. She is very well off. She speaks 7 languages. She has over 500,000 miles on American Airlines. She told me last year she flew around the world 7 times last year. Company creates power plants and this is huge stuff like the state of California when they have to replace the generators and the turbines in their hydroelectric dams. Her company is the kind of place that does that. People that are creating all these cryptocurrency, blockchain things, they consume an enormous amount of electricity. And the same with artificial intelligence facilities. And so her company creates these huge power plants that power a whole city, really. And so she's a citizen of Portugal, Switzerland, and the United States. And so she kind of brings a global view into things that is really invaluable. And then there's just me, the absent-minded professor.
Stop
And
it.
I don't know, the four of us kind of have a chemistry and we just love talking with each other. And so we don't talk about politics at all. We talk about things that are really spiritual in nature. Confidence and courage and creating yourselves, those sorts of things. We talk a lot about the quantum physics, the quantum universe, and I don't know how much you've studied about that, but there's really a big merger now going on between spirituality and the quantum mechanics, quantum universe, and that whole idea of energy. And the more I look into it, the more I start believing that that's what Jesus was about all along. It's like our temples have been hijacked by the ruling class. You can find God within yourself. You are the universe experiencing yourself. And the more I'm looking into it and reading about it and everything, I really believe Jesus really knew all about the quantum universe and energy levels and how we can create our reality by what we choose to think about. And so those are the types of things that we talk about often is how to encourage people to have the character traits that are going to help them thrive, not just survive, but how do you thrive and live your best life? And so we're just having the best time. And we did a show last night and like already 1,000 people have watched it this morning. And I don't know what's happening, but I think uh, a lot of people are finding value in the content and I'm having a really great time and I'm learning a lot too because I can't have conversation with those three women without learning a ton of stuff by the time the show's over myself. So it's really a lot of fun.
If you could give an encouragement to someone today, I know you're so positive, you have, your history we just went through, but right now we're going backwards in America. And so, how do you navigate every single day living in Trump's America as a trans person? And what would you say to somebody who might be experiencing complete hopelessness maybe in this moment
Yeah.
for people? Do you have any advice for us?
First thing you have to do is see through the game. The Republican Party can't say, we're the party of billionaires. Everything we do is to make billionaires more wealthy. We're the party of deregulation because oligarchs hate regulation. We're the party of anti-union because cheap labor is huge. It's a huge part of making billions and billions of dollars. They can't do that. They can't run on that platform. Vote for me and we're going to, eliminate all the regulations. We're going to raise your taxes and lower their taxes. We're going to be anti-union. We're going to militarize the police because we're going to support propaganda outlets and we're going to diminish the legacy news media. We're going to demonize. They can't run on that platform. And so what they do is they play the game of division. What's wrong with your life is all of these immigrants coming. That's what's wrong with your life. What's wrong with your life is they make it sound like 0.6% of of our population is transgender or non-binary. That's 6 out of 1,000 people. They make it sound like we're everywhere and we're coming after your children like we're all over the place. No, 6 out of 1,000 people have a medical condition that we need some very specialized health care for. And we know it from childhood. We know it that we have been wired differently. And so there are all of these divisive things, and they've been playing this game for a long time. And in the 50s, it started with me. It was school desegregation. You don't want these black males in the same classroom with your little daughters, and those dog whistles to patriarchy and all of that stuff. And so what they have done is to create this culture where we're hating each other. And that's because they can't run on, we're going to raise your taxes and get rid of you. They can't run on that. They can run on, you have all of these huge problems caused by all of these people that aren't white, that aren't Christian, and vote for me and I am going to fix it all for you. And so it's an education thing. It's to help people see that your neighbors are really pretty good people if you get to know them. Who wouldn't want to live in a community where everybody feels safe and they're loving each other? And I don't care if it's a same-sex marriage or not. If they love each other and they're building a life together and they want to live in my neighborhood and make my neighborhood, I mean, it's like, to help people see that no, my neighbor is not my enemy. It's these people that just are so hungry for power and money, and it's getting through with some people. They're realizing that they've been conned and they've been played. And especially with groups like the Heritage Foundation, it's like they don't give a flip about your religion. They just want to manipulate religious people. And my goodness, are they masterful at that. Oh, boy, do they wordsmith stuff and tilt it. I mean, they're really, really good at that. And so it's an education job. And I try to teach people that no, I am not your enemy. Actually, I'm a really fabulous person for you to know. If I was your neighbor, you would be happy to have me for a neighbor. I'm probably better than the neighbor you've got right now, actually. And it's just that relationship building and talking to people and getting to know them and demystifying all of this stuff about race and gender and patriarchy. Oh my gosh, women's reproductive. We have got so much stuff to turn around. And so when I think about my state, how do I keep going? I said there's 117 Christian nationalist GOP supermajority seats in our legislature. And to me, that sounds like a manageable number in terms of how do we pick them off and replace them with liberals. I believe that's a doable thing. I don't know if I can do it before the next election in 2026 or 10 years from now in 2035, but I believe that I can flip, not me. I believe the people in my state can flip our General Assembly to at least get a government that is representative of the people, that understands these are your constituencies. The Heritage Foundation is not your boss, even though that's where all the money is coming from, that's going into all of this stuff. And so the amount of money that the oligarchy is pouring into this is very formidable. And I just really can't think about that because all I can think about is people. The protests have to grow faster than the Trump administration can establish a Gestapo to squelch us all. And that's this really tender area where we are right now. And I can't stop and I can't relax because now is the time to strike with all of that populace. We don't have billions and billions of dollars to donate to the Heritage Foundation. We have people, we have 300 million people, and that's the thing I want to do is people think, I'm just one person. What can I do? But we've got nearly 8 billion people on this planet that are telling themselves that lie. So, yeah, you're just one person.
Exactly.
Let me tell you what you can do. And so that gets me excited because I see it happening. I do. There's going to be plenty of people that double down on their idolatry of Trump. There's no doubt about that. They are going to become more hateful. But there's a whole bunch of people that are starting to say, when I look at my 401k, when I look at what's happening in the grocery store, when I look at what's happening to my public schools, I didn't make the best choice. And so that's what, I don't have 300 billion people. I've got 300 million citizens that aren't going to take it. So I try to keep my eye on the big picture and not get overwhelmed by how formidable the opponents are. And I'm just not smart enough to know any better, I guess.
I feel the same way. I started this movie project and 5, 6, 7 years later, and I'm like, what was I thinking? Because it was the hardest thing that I've ever done in my life. But just like you were saying, I could not stand silent and not do anything, and so what can one person do? And then I'm sometimes still pinch myself on the things we've been able to accomplish with the film. But then the things that you're able to, right.
That's really, I was not being honest with you. My energy comes at what has happened to the life and love and legacy of Jesus. It's like, oh my gosh, what they have done to thoroughly tarnish and pollute and turn this into an idolatrous kind of relationship. You set me on a path to really start looking into stuff. And I just real quickly, I wanted to mention a couple of books. I brought them real quickly.
Love it. Yes.
This one, The Hidden Roots of White Supremacy by Robert Johnson, New York Times bestseller. This is such a powerful book because I always wondered, how did white supremacy ever become a thing? Where did that come from? Where did patriarchy come from? And oh my gosh, this is just full of primary resources. Pope Alexander the Sixth is the one that legitimized white supremacy and how to treat people of colonizing capitalism is what it is how the church and monarchies have jumped into bed together to create colonizing capitalism. I mean, the treaty agreements and the dates they were signed and the dates they were broken. And I mean, it's a really sordid history, but it's also where do we go from now? It's a great book. And then the other thing that I read that I wanted to be sure to mention is this one, Mary Magdalene Revealed by Megan Watterson. Oh my gosh, what is it? The First Apostle, Her Feminist Gospel, and the Christianity we haven't tried yet. Oh my gosh, if you want to know biblical stuff that has been buried, beginning with Emperor Constantine, oh my gosh, this is it. And when you look at like the Gospel of Mary Magdalene and the Gospel of Philip and the Gospel of Stephen and all of these things, she asks a really good question. When you look at what Constantine decided to incorporate and call a Bible, you also have to look at what they didn't want to incorporate and what they didn't want to include. And so this is a book that exposes all of that stuff. And I know I've talked way too much and I'm really sorry. I can't help it because you're such an important figure in my life because you gave me one of the most important tools that I have and you set me on a path that has really I mean, when I think about God and I think about Jesus, there's one thing that's absolutely sure. Once upon a time, there was a carpenter in Nazareth whose life upended this world. It has never been the same. And that's somebody I need to learn about. There's so much garbage that has been created to steer people in a certain direction. And when you look at like what Mary Magdalene had to say about Jesus, when you look at what Philip had to say, when you had to look at the jealousy of Peter because Jesus was closer to a woman than he was. I mean, it's really, really causing me to re-examine everything about my faith because I am angry at what has happened to the message of Jesus and the love that he intended to bring to this world and how loving your neighbor as yourself is the secret to everything and how the church has really turned into something like, no, we can't have that. No,
Yeah.
we really can't. Superior, this is a place where you come to learn how inferior those people outside are to you. And so the church has just become nothing more but a club to create this sense of superiority and inferiority. And I just, oh my gosh, I can't, I'm really, really incensed at what has been done to the love of God is revealed through that carpenter from Nazareth. And so there are lots of ways to learn about that figure besides the Bible. And that's the thing that you have turned me on to.
That's great.
And I'm so grateful for all of that.
I'm so grateful for you. I'm grateful for all the work that you do and all the things I learned from you and just the inspiration that you are in your state every single day, and it's quite an inspiration.
Constantine was a relentless persecutor of Christians. By some accounts, he slaughtered over 40,000 Christians. And whenever the centurions would go into these villages to slaughter the Christians, anything that looked like a letter or document of anything, they would confiscate that stuff. And so when the Christians were dispersed from Jerusalem, and they went everywhere, all over the world, some of them had actually witnessed Jesus. They'd been with him, were relatives of people that had experienced miracles or association and all that stuff. So there's all kinds of stories that travel out of Jerusalem with the dispersion of the Christians. And the way they would go it would be like, you have a letter that was written by John, or you have some, and they would hand copy those things. And there's no photocopy machines. They were going all over and they'd run into each other, and some of them had this letter or this document. They would hand copy those things. And so Constantine has killed 40,000 Christians and confiscated all of their documents. And so that council at Nicaea is where he throws down all of these confiscated documents that have been hand copied. Some of them are, flawed from this copy doesn't match this copy. There's all this stuff going on. And Megan Watterson does a great job of talking about what books were included, what their message is compared to the books that weren't included, and what their message is. And it's undeniable because you can read those things. You can read what Mary Magdalene herself had to say about it all. And that's important information. It's huge information. And so to assume that there's no hidden agenda because Constantine was the first Christian nationalist. I need you to understand this. He wanted to establish a government-supported religion for the whole Roman Empire, and Catholic means universal. That's the Latin word for universal. He wanted to establish a universal religion. This is going to be your holy book. And to assume that that is the inerrant, infallible, God-breathed word of God, that there's no interference, there's no hidden agenda, that just takes more faith than I've got right now. When you look at what's going on, and books that expose like the roots of white supremacy came from a papal edict. Pope Alexander, it was like you think of these people as infidels and savages. And we have the opportunity to take the world for Christ, and that's why we got to occupy these continents so we can enrich ourselves, so we can take the world for Christ. And anybody that doesn't want to accept Christ is an enemy of Christ, and you can go ahead and kill him. Tecumseh, the great chief warrior Tecumseh says, when the son of your own God came, you killed him. And after he's dead, you decided to worship him and kill everybody else that wouldn't. And that's what a Native American chief had to think about, the way
Wow.
Christianity was portrayed. When you start reading things like that, it really helps you to understand that there's more to that quantum physics aspect of spirituality than we've been led to believe. You don't have to go to a franchise to become saved.
Yeah.
This is not where you connect with the God that has always been inside you. This is not how you do it. And you can see why he needed to be executed for that kind of message. And so anyhow, I'm really getting off track, but those are fabulous books. And really it's like how we got the Bible. The more I look into that, the more impossible it is for me to not believe that we have been played by rulers from the beginning.
Yeah.
It's an element of control.
Yeah.
Who is it? Seneca says, religion to the common person is true, to the wise person it's false, and to rulers it's useful. And he was a
Yep.
contemporary of Jesus. And so that has been going on for centuries. And so that's another thing that really motivates me. Love. And this kind of love that was taught this way, and connecting with that and bringing that to your neighbors and having those kind of relationships characterized by that. And how do we do that? I'll tell you something else too. Your debut party at Doc New NYC.
Yeah.
I had a chance to spend a little time with your dad, and he was so honest with me. And, he talked about how he sees homosexuality in the Bible. And I asked him, have you ever really studied what it has to say about eunuchs? And he was very honest. He said, no, I haven't thought about that at all. And I said, well, let me work up some stuff about what the Bible teaches about eunuchs, people that are both and neither male nor female, people who cannot procreate. And that has turned into a book. I never sent him that letter because I can't stop writing about the things that triggered and how eunuchs have been around since the beginning of time. They are from the book of Genesis all the way through Acts and Stephen and the Ethiopian eunuch. Oh my gosh, who is an amazing figure when you look at what that individual did for the whole continent of Africa during their lifetime. And so the book of Esther, the eunuchs in the book of Esther saved the bloodline of Christ from being exterminated. I mean, they were all in captivity, and the decision had been made to exterminate them. And the eunuchs working through Esther are the ones that get the king to reconsider that plan. And so, just, I want Bible believers to see, because they're convinced that the Bible says you're either all male or all female and there's nothing in between. And it's like, no, every place it talks, you're created male and female. It doesn't say male or female. It never says male or female. It says male and female. We each have traits of both. Every embryo begins as a female embryo, and nothing about XY chromosomes or SRY genes attached to those chromosomes. Nothing about that kicks in until like the 6th to 8th week of gestation. And that is precisely why men have nipples. And I need people to think about that. You are male and female, and all you have to do is look down your shirt. For heaven's sakes, get off this high horse, because where they can't believe that anybody could possibly be wired or created any differently. And then Jesus himself in Matthew 19:11-12, he says, this teaching isn't for everyone, only for those to whom it's been given. Some people are born eunuchs. Well, were made eunuchs by other people. Some people choose to become eunuchs to enter the kingdom of God. It's like their sexuality has become such a problem that they choose to become eunuchs because it's the only way they can get right with God. And that was Jesus himself. It's hidden in plain sight. Here you have the creator who claims to be present at the creation saying, oh yeah, God, yeah, we created eunuchs on purpose. We meant to do that. And it also starts out, and this was one thing that really took me a long time to internalize. He says, this teaching is not for everyone, only for those to whom it has been given. And I started thinking about that word given. And it was, you mean you gave me a gift? All my life I've been thinking it was a curse. All my life I've been thinking it was torment. You did, I had a lot of resentment about God for a huge part of my life. But to see Jesus say, no, this is given. Some people are born eunuchs. And I never thought about it as a gift. And once I did, it changed everything. It's like, I don't have to be ashamed of who I am. I really don't. And to turn around that narrative that says we don't deserve to live, I really need to turn that around. And so that's another reason why I'm so in 1946. And the other thing is just these people that believe that by erasing their neighbors, by punishing them, persecuting and oppressing them, they think they're doing God a favor. And it's like, oh my gosh, do we have something to talk about? And so I can begin teaching from there, because they are not doing God any favors by hating their queer community. That is not gaining them a bigger mansion in heaven by any means. I don't know. We just go on, but the people that have weaponized the Bible, oh my gosh, it's just, they pay no attention to what it says about divorce and remarriage. They pay no attention to the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. And what do you do with the hungry people that are on your doorstep? Or the parable of the sheep and the goats, and how you know what's going to be on the test at judgment, and what the answers are. I was hungry, I was thirsty, I was in prison, I was sick. What did you do to the least among you? How did you treat the least among you is the test there on judgment. And you're either a sheep or a goat. And you
Yeah.
don't have to be a brilliant theologian or anything. You just have to love your neighbor. It's so
Yeah.
simple. And so I really hate how the Bible has been weaponized. The church, Christian nationalists just don't care about religion. They care about manipulating religious people. And we have just got to see through that.
Yeah, I know. And I know we've talked before about the genders mentioned in the Talmud. That's another key thing that I bring up to people, besides the intersex conversation, which I always bring up when everybody has trouble with gender identity or struggles with this. I'm like, think about, people are born this way. Now take another step, they could be born in the wrong body. But we know that the Hebrew rabbis were writing about this 2,000 years ago.
Right.
And that's something that whenever I mention to Christians, or I've mentioned to my dad, it's like they just initially don't believe it. Now, since then, my dad has looked it up and we've had some other conversations around it, but
what happened to the 8 genders of the Talmud is one of the toughest questions you will ever try to answer. But it's all enmeshed in colonization, because colonizing was a very risky business. The King James that authorized the King James version of the Bible was the major shareholder in the Virginia Company that came to establish the first permanent English settlement in America, which was Jamestown on the James River. It's all named after him, and 80% of them were dead within the first year. And that was the truth about colonizing. The people that you sent to colonize a nation, to colonize a continent, most of them were going to die young. They were going to die within that first year. And so you had to emphasize procreation. And because your whole thing is establishing a population of worker bees to develop wealth and send back to the throne. And so that's where I start seeing about how gender norms and conformity to rigid gender norms kind of made the 8 genders disappear. Men are supposed to be the public face. Women are the domestic face. They stay home. They never come out. They cook and clean and have babies. All of that stuff is really deeply entrenched in colonizing capitalism, is what I believe.
yeah.
We'll say for it, as a kid, how many times did you see pictures of like African women bare-breasted? They didn't cover up anything. Or African men with long hair and earrings and necklaces. And it was like, no, we can't have that. We can't have this blurry view of gender. We have to have this very rigid view of gender. Who's in charge? White males, white supremacy. Oh my gosh, when you go back and look at all that, it's just clear as a bell. It's all being used to control people. Third gender people have been around since the beginning of time. And whose idea was it to get rid of the 8 genders in the Talmud?
Yeah, that's what I'd like to know.
That's a tough question to answer.
Yeah.
To learn more about Dr. Bobbie Glass, follow her on Instagram and check out her podcast, Trans Gurus. Links are in our show notes. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on the 1946 Culture Shift Tour.